Old houses, ruined chapels, forgotten cathedrals. Some places are not abandoned, they are waiting. Tonight, I'll share with you 3 stories of inheritance, discovery, and devotion gone wrong. Each begins with silence. Each ends with something calling back from the dark. The cathedral was abandoned, its organ broken beyond repair. Yet at midnight, the music began to play, and I soon learned it was not hymns that echoed through the pipes, but something alive. I was never a religious man, but when I took the job as caretaker for St. Reinald's Cathedral, I told myself I would grow used to the silence. The church had been abandoned for years. Its windows were broken, its pews warped with damp, its roof patched with rotting boards. Yet there was still a kind of dignity in the place, a lingering weight in its vastness. Most nights, I worked alone. I would sweep the floors, tend to the leaking gutters, and climb the bell tower to clear away the nesting birds. The only company I kept was the echo of my own footsteps, bouncing back at me from the stone walls. But then came the music. It began on my 2nd week. I woke in my quarters, a narrow room beside the nave, to the sound of the pipe organ. The notes rolled through the halls with a slow, solemn power, each one deep enough to shake the floorboards beneath my bed. I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling. The organ had been broken for decades. The pipes were bent and rusted. The keys were missing ivory. No one should have been able to play it. Still, the music went on. A hymn I did not recognize. The melody rose and swelled until the cathedral seemed to breathe with it. And then, as suddenly as it began, the sound cut off. The silence that followed was heavier than the song itself. At dawn, I went to the choir loft. Dust lay thick across the benches. The organ loomed at the center, pipes towering like a forest of dead trees. I touched the keys, and they crumbled under my fingers. The instrument was nothing but ruin. Yet each night, as the clock struck 12, the music returned. The hymns changed. Some were bright and exalting, others slow and mournful, but all of them carried the same unnatural weight. The notes pressed into me, vibrating through my ribs, leaving me weak when they ceased. I tried stuffing cloth in my ears. I tried sleeping in the bell tower. It did not matter. The organ's voice filled the cathedral, and it always reached me. One night, I decided to watch. I crept into the loft before midnight and sat in the shadows. My lantern burned low, and the silence pressed close, thick with expectation. Then the clock tolled. The first note thundered, shaking the wood beneath me. The organ came alive. Keys depressed, pedals shifted, stops slid open and closed. But there was no one at the bench. The seat was empty, and still the music poured forth, growing in strength until it rattled the stained glass in its frames. I wanted to run. My legs would not move. The hymn was like a tide, pulling me toward the bench. I staggered forward, drawn by the rhythm, until I stood at the edge of the keys. That was when I saw it. Blood. Fresh blood smeared across the ivory, dripping down the wood to pool on the floor. The keys struck themselves again, and each movement left a darker stain. The hymn ended. The silence returned. And in that silence, I thought I heard a sigh, a long, contented breath, as though the cathedral itself had been fed. After that night, I avoided the loft. I kept my duties confined to the lower halls, though even there, the music found me. It was stronger now, louder, spilling into the streets outside. Villagers began to whisper. They said the church was waking, that its heart was beating again. Some came to listen. They stood outside at midnight, hearing what I heard, though none dared enter. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, as though the hymns reached into them too. One evening, the innkeeper's daughter vanished. They found her shoes at the cathedral steps, but no trace of her inside. The villagers blamed me, though I swore I had seen nothing. That night, when the organ began, the hymn was different. It was not a hymn at all. It was a cry, a rising, twisting scream that tore through the pipes, bending into melody only at the very edges. The sound clawed at me until I fell to my knees, and then I heard her. Her voice. She was singing with the organ. Her cries threaded through the music, a human tone wrapped inside the pipes. I covered my ears, but it was no use. Her voice was everywhere, begging, pleading, swallowed in the tide of sound. At dawn, I searched the loft. The bench was soaked with blood. It dripped onto the pedals, smeared across the keys. I knew then what the organ demanded. It needed players. I wanted to leave. God knows I wanted to. But something held me. Some tether bound me to the cathedral. Each night, as the music grew, so too did the weight inside me. It pulled me closer, urging me up the stairs, urging me to sit at the bench. Last night, I gave in. The clock struck 12, and the organ stirred. I took my place at the seat. My hands shook as I placed them on the keys. They were warm, slick with blood. The hymn rose, vast and furious, and I felt it flow through me. My fingers moved without will, striking chords I did not know, weaving melodies that poured like fire through the pipes. My body trembled, my vision blurred, but still, I played. And then, beneath the music, I heard them. Voices, not one, but many, hundreds, rising in chorus. All those who had come before me, bound inside the cathedral walls, their souls straining through the pipes. The hymn swelled to its end. The final chord held, screaming, until the air itself shook. When it ended, I collapsed, my hands torn and bleeding across the keys. I am writing this now in the faint light of dawn. My hands ache. The blood is not mine alone. The organ waits for me tonight, and I know I will not resist, because the silence is worse than the song. And when I close my eyes, I hear the chorus still, whispering, urging me back to the bench. Sometimes an old house carries more than just history. When I inherited a manor from a relative I never knew, I thought it was a gift. Instead, it became a trap I could never leave. I never asked for the house. In truth, I didn't even know the man who left it to me. A distant relative, they said, a great uncle on my mother's side. He died alone, in a countryside manor, 2 hours outside of town. And for reasons I still don't understand, the property fell into my hands. The first time I saw it, I thought of bones. The house loomed pale and hollow against the gray sky, with its windows like sunken eyes, and its ivy-cloaked walls sagging under their own weight. The iron gate groaned when I pushed it open, as though it resented being disturbed. Inside, the air was stale, the kind of thick, unmoving air that clings to fabric and skin. Dust curled in the light of my lantern, drifting like ash. The floors creaked with every step, and I couldn't tell if the sound came from my boots or from the house itself shifting in its age. I explored slowly, room by room. The drawing room smelled of damp wood and forgotten perfumes. The library was filled with rotting books, their pages sticking together like wet leaves. But what caught me most was the west wing. Its double doors were locked with rusted chains, heavy enough to suggest someone had wanted them sealed forever. That first night, I dreamed of footsteps, not my own, but deliberate, echoing strides, pacing the length of the corridor outside my room. When I woke, the house was silent. Yet when I reached for the lamp, I swore I saw the faintest indentation on the rug near the door, as though someone had been standing there, waiting. On the second day, I wandered through the gallery of portraits, faces of people I had never met, dressed in clothing from centuries past, stared down at me with sharp, painted eyes. One canvas stopped me cold. The man depicted there had my jawline, my cheekbones, even the same uneven slope of my nose. I thought it a trick of resemblance, until I noticed the date beneath the frame, 1794. That night, I didn't dream. I heard them, the same footsteps, slower now, closer, and beneath them, faint whispers, muffled as though spoken through walls. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. But when I pulled back, I realized the gallery was visible through the crack of the west wing doors, and though the light was dim, I could swear their expressions had changed. I told myself I would leave in the morning, sell the place, burn it down, anything. But morning came, and the chain on the west wing was broken. It lay in a pile on the floor, rust dust, scattered like dried blood. The doors were slightly open, just enough to suggest invitation. I don't remember crossing the threshold. I only remember the feeling. Cold, absolute cold, like stepping into a grave. The hall stretched on longer than it should have, lined with more portraits, newer, sharper, almost alive, and every painting had my features. Not just resemblance, my face. Different ages, different expressions, but mine. The last portrait was unfinished. An outline of my body, the faint beginning of a face, my face. The brush and palette still rested on the table beside it, wet with fresh paint. And in that moment, I understood this was not an inheritance. It was an invitation. The footsteps began again, all around me this time, pressing closer in the dark. I turned, but the hallway behind me had vanished. Only walls, lined with portraits, each smiling wider now, teeth showing in painted mouths that should have been still. I ran, or thought I did, but the floor dragged at me, the walls leaned in. My breath grew short, as though the air itself thickened with every step. When I reached for the door, it wasn't there. Only another canvas, blank at first, then slowly, filling with color. A stroke of hair, a line of a cheek, the hollow of a throat. My throat. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, watching myself take shape in oil and pigment. The whispers were louder now, voices calling my name in tones I almost recognized. Family. The last thing I remember was the brush moving though. No hand held it. It finished the curve of my jaw, my eyes, my mouth, slightly open in a silent scream. And then the lantern went out. I woke in the drawing room at dawn. Dust, silence, and cold ash in the fireplace. But when I looked to the west wing doors, they were sealed again. The chain hole, unbroken. Only the gallery proved otherwise. For there, among the rows of ancestors, was the new portrait. The paint, still glistening. My face, frozen in terror, staring back at me forever. Beneath my home, I discovered ruins that should have stayed buried. A forgotten chapel, an altar scarred by fire, and a chorus of voices that never stopped calling my name. The floor of my house had always felt uneven. A strange slant in the hallway, a dip near the kitchen where the boards groaned louder than the rest. I told myself it was age. After all, the house was old. Older than the street around it, built when the village was nothing but farmland and superstition. But one evening, during a storm, a section of the floor gave way. The wood splintered, and beneath it, I saw not soil, not stone, but a hollow, a chamber. I should have sealed it, nailed the boards shut, and forgotten. But curiosity is its own disease. I fetched a lantern, pulled the remaining planks loose, and lowered myself into the dark. The air hit me first. Cold, damp, tinged with something metallic, like the inside of a long-abandoned cellar. The lantern's light spread out in a wavering circle, and the ground beneath my boots was not dirt. It was stone, worked stone. I realized I was standing in the ruins of a chapel. The walls rose around me, crumbled but still intact in places. I could see faint traces of frescoes, colors eaten away by centuries. An arch loomed overhead, cracked but proud, like the bones of a spine, and at the far end, an altar. It was untouched. The stone slab was blackened, scorched as though fire had licked across it, yet no other part of the chamber bore signs of burning. Only the altar, as though something had clawed and screamed and burned itself free upon that single spot. I leaned closer, the lantern trembling in my hand. Carved into its surface were symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals, jagged lines, interlocking shapes that pulled the eye deeper the longer I stared. For a moment, I swore they shifted, not in my vision, but on the stone itself. I fled then, clambered back up through the hole, sealed it as best I could. Told myself it was just ruin, just history. Yet that night, as the storm raged above, I lay in bed and heard it. Chanting. Low, steady voices rising through the floorboards. They came in waves, rhythmic, as though in worship. I pressed my hands to my ears. The sound didn't stop. It was inside the walls, inside the air itself. The next morning, I tore the boards open again, desperate to prove myself mad. But the chapel was silent, only shadows and dust, as before. Still, I could not stay away. I returned each night, lantern in hand, descending into that hollow place. The voices would come, faint at first, then stronger, echoing off the stone. Yet no matter how long I searched, I never found their source. Until the fifth night. The lantern flickered, then died. Darkness swallowed me, thick as water, and in that darkness, I saw them. Not with my eyes, but in the way one feels a presence in a room. Shapes lined the pews, hunched in devotion, faceless and still. The chanting thundered, shaking the very walls, until my bones ached with each syllable. The altar glowed faintly, embers smoldering where the carvings had been. The fire had returned. I don't remember leaving. I only remember waking in my bed, the taste of ash in my mouth. From then on, the chanting never ceased. Day and night, in whispers or in roars, it filled my house. I fled to the inn in the village, desperate for rest. But even there, I heard it, muffled beneath the floorboards of my mind. I asked the innkeeper about the chapel. Her face drained of color. She told me the house stood on cursed ground. Long ago, a sect had built a chapel to worship something older than God. When the villagers discovered it, they burned the place, collapsed it into the earth. But fire could not erase what had been invited. That night, I returned, lantern shaking in my grip. I told myself I would end it, destroy the altar, bury the place forever. But when I entered, the chapel was alive. Candles burned in the walls where none had been before. The pews were full, shadows pressed together, heads bowed, and at the altar stood a figure in robes, arms raised. The chanting stopped. Every head turned toward me. I dropped the lantern. It shattered, light spilling and dying in the same breath. But even in darkness, I felt them move, rising, stepping closer, their shapes pressed against me, cold and endless. A hand, if it was a hand, gripped my shoulder. Another brushed my face. The robed figure's voice whispered in a language I did not know, yet every syllable burned in my chest. When I woke, it was morning again. The boards in my house were whole. No hole, no chapel, only silence. But sometimes, late at night, I hear it still. The floor hums beneath my feet, faint but steady, the rhythm of a chant, waiting. And when I close my eyes, I see the altar. The fire has spread. The carvings are complete now, forming a circle, a doorway. And I know the next time I descend, If the house allows it, I will not return. Some inheritances are better left unclaimed, some ruins are better left untouched, and some music should never be heard again. But we cannot help ourselves. We go closer, we listen, and in the silence that follows, something always listens back.